So welcome to video number 4 in the Scotlanders series. So far we've touched on various themes that are close to our hearts, such as history, castles, the gory story of Robert the Bruce, and of course our fantastic mountains. However,
it's 2018 and you cannot talk about visiting Scotland without talking about Outlander. It has absolutely transformed the face of tourism in this country, and today we are at none other than Midhope Castle, known to you more likely as Lallybroch, home of no less than Jamie Fraser himself.
and of course in this show it's an absolutely beautiful little base. It's a quaint area and a place of safety for Jamie and Claire in their various tumultuous travels. However, now that we have got here, we are realising, and you will soon experience for yourself, that it's maybe not quite as beautiful as all that.
I really don't think that anywhere has felt the Outlander effect quite like Midhope Castle. I'm the castle hunter after all. It's what I do to track down places like this, and I went years without hearing a single peep about this place. Had to consult 3 or 4 different maps to find it when I first came here 4 or 5 years ago. Now, it has literally changed the maps. On some maps it's not called Midhope Castle anymore, it's just called Lallybroch. I can't think of a better example of zero to hero thanks to Outlander than Midhope Castle. Now, some people might be inclined to give you grief for coming to Scotland because of a TV show. Don't you dare let them, because for centuries, people have been visiting Scotland on the back of stories. If we were around in the 17th century, we would all be rushing up to Cawdor Castle because of Shakespeare's Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor, Thane of Glamis. If we were around in the 19th century, we'd be going to some ruined castle on the edge of a loch because of Walter Scott's novels. Outlander is just the latest iteration of a long tradition.
And of all the regions in Scotland that featured most prominently in Outlander filming, Fife is perhaps one of the biggest. It's a very diverse region, it's got a lovely stretch of coastline, and it was used in several different locations throughout the show. Falkland was one, and now we're in Curris, which is a fantastic seaside resort. It's a royal borough and it's got a 17th century feel. It looks dated, it looks like time has just left it alone, so it was a very logical choice. This particular kirk was also used, it's just outside the town, and this was the town of Cranesmuir in Outlander, which was the home of Geillis Duncan, but was also the site where she was sentenced to death in that harrowing scene where she was taken away from the courtroom and off to be burned as a witch.
We're in Falkland, and you may recognise Falkland because in Outlander it doubles for Inverness in the 1940s. This is where Claire and Frank come on their honeymoon, and this is where we first see Jamie Fraser, although we don't really know who he is, this mysterious man who's spying on Claire while she's getting ready next to that fountain in that window.
Aberdour Castle is a masterclass in the evolution of Scotland's castles, with 3 distinct sections spanning 800 years of history and being a serious contender for Scotland's oldest stone castle. Its terrace garden once grew nectarines and jasmine, and the placid atmosphere makes it the perfect stand-in for the Abbey St Anne de Beaupré, where Jamie recovered from the horrors of Wentworth Prison. It's not often that you can get away with passing Scotland off as France, especially when the weather's dreek like this, but Dysart Harbour was pitch perfect as the French port of Le Havre. The harbour looks like it should be in the middle of nowhere, but is actually walkable from Kirkcaldy. Maybe just check the forecast first. It's kind of funny that the Outlander production chose to film one of the most harrowing sequences at Wentworth Prison here in Lithgow Palace. This is where Jamie had his terrible ordeal. It's strange because far from being a grim place, this was where kings and queens went to party it up in style. This is a Renaissance palace, mostly built by Kings James IV and James V. Now they were really out to prove that they were every inch the equal of their supposedly more refined European counterparts.
And how much longer did you think it would be before we mentioned Craignadoon, the incredible site that was central to the whole Outlander story, where Claire found the standing stones that transported her through time and back into the arms of a certain Jacobite. But the stones may not actually exist here. Unfortunately, that was part of the fiction of the show. But what a great location. Beautiful Highland scenery in rural Perthshire, under the watchful eye of Schiehallion Mountain, gorgeous Highland tree lines, and the beautiful Loch Rannoch. Whenever you're talking about gorgeous Highland scenery, this place is guaranteed to come up. It featured very briefly in the opening credits of Outlander. It's the base for so many stunning walking opportunities, but it's perhaps for its melancholic past that this glen is most well known, because it was here in 1692 when the resident MacDonald clan were near wiped out by the Clan Campbell under the orders of the British government. It was a massacre, and it's because of that reason that there's still a sadness that surrounds this beautiful, beautiful glen.
And next up, we're off to Doune Castle, which you will surely recognise as Castle Leoch, base of Colum and his clan of Mackenzies, used particularly in Season 1. It's a beautiful location this, near Stirling and alongside the River Teith in central Scotland. It's likely to have originally been built in the 13th century, but it wasn't until the following century, after the Wars of Independence, when it was damaged, that it really came into its own. But it wasn't just Scotland's beautiful and quaint towns and villages and stunning Highland glens that featured in the filming of Outlander, and I'm delighted to say that my home city of Glasgow also featured prominently. The Pollok Park on the south side was used as the site of the duelling match between Blackjack Randall and Jamie in Season 2, and this beautiful building behind me, the stunning Glasgow Cathedral, is one of the very few remaining examples of medieval architecture in Glasgow. It's also a 12th century ruin, making it one of the oldest and most fantastically, brilliantly beautiful buildings in Britain. And it featured as the Parisian Hospital in Season 2, where Claire was volunteering and unfortunately where she ultimately also had her miscarriage. And Glasgow's West End also featured prominently in Season 3 filming when it doubled as Boston. If you remember, Claire and Frank were heading for the east coast of the US and attempting to start a new life despite their difficult relationship. It was the university, Glasgow's famous Gothic structure, which doubled as Harvard on the show, and today the West End is famous for its youthful vibe, wonderful nightlife and fantastic Victorian architecture.
Complete with neoclassical statues and perhaps Scotland's most impressive garden, visiting Drummond Castle near Crieff really does feel like stepping into a storybook. It was cast perfectly as the gardens and orchard of the Palace of Versailles, though the stout stone tower atop the hill is a reminder that Drummond doesn't just look great, it could also put up a real fight. This is Scotland after all. Dunure Castle and Harbour came into the spotlight with Season 3. Young Ian made his ill-fated swim to Silky's Island here, and the harbour was where Claire and Jamie boarded the Artemis and set sail for Jamaica. The name Dunure means Fort of the Yew Tree, and here's a hint, anytime you see Dun, D-U-N, there was, or maybe still is, a fort there. Dunure was the main seat of the Kennedy family in the 1200s, and they were a really prominent family even then, with the Kennedys rising to power in later centuries, with one marrying King Robert III's daughter, and another becoming the Bishop of St. Andrews. A quite special feature near the castle is the Dunure Labyrinth, a whimsical maze a stone's throw from the castle. It helps to give the whole place a kind of magical fairy tale vibe. And the castle was ruinous by the late 1600s, with the finer stones, shall we say, recycled by the locals. Still, the ruins, coastline, and harbour at Dunure make it one of the most romantic Outlander locations there is, and that's saying something. Claire and Jamie's reunion in Alexander Malcolm's print shop in Season 3 is one of Outlander's most iconic scenes, and in fact, while we were filming this footage, we had about 25 people come along trying to recreate it. This is Bakehouse Close in Edinburgh, at the lower end of the famous Royal Mile stretching from Edinburgh Castle to Holyrood Palace. You can follow in Claire's exact steps into a place little changed in the past 400 years. Hundreds made their home here, and when Claire came here in the 1760s, she would in fact have found a bustling publishing industry. Directly across, however, is another prominent side of life in Jacobite-era Edinburgh, a brothel. It was one of Edinburgh's best-known brothels, known as the Cock and Trumpet, for the arms of the Atchisons above the entrance. In its courtyard is a truly strange find, a plaque recalling Ranger's Impartial List of Ladies, a sort of 18th century TripAdvisor for, well, you can probably guess. Jamie has a lot to answer for. We're now standing at ground zero of one of the most harrowing scenes in modern television history. The torture of Jamie at the hands of Blackjack Randall in Fort William. It happened right here atop these rocks. And if you think that's brutal, then just look at real history. It can match Outlander for every drop of blood, because in the tower just behind us was a pit prison. Now that's grim enough, but they would actually get you soaked by the incoming tide twice every single day. So for everything they did to Jamie, at least they didn't chuck him in there at the end of it.
Blackness is a particularly memorable castle for me. It was the first one that I can recall as a little boy. We were in school, as a school trip with everyone, all my little friends and me running around this place. But even then, I could tell this was a serious castle. It was proper, it was grim, it was moody. This was not a happy place. So a fantastic choice once again by the Outlander team.
It was built by the Crichton family, who were pretty notorious. A member of the Crichtons orchestrated the Black Dinner, which inspired the Red Wedding in George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. So pretty brutal, and whether it came to politicking or castle building, the Crichtons didn't mess around. This was such a strong castle that it was used all the way into the modern era, being garrisoned in the First World War. You run up to the yett, this iron gate, we call a gate a yett in Scotland. As you're chipping away at that, someone maybe drops something like superheated sand down on you, so now you've got super hot sand in the cracks of your armour. Ooh, you're doing a hot little dance. You're running through, you're alive, but you're hurting. You turn the corner, you think you're safe, and then you get blasted in the back by the gunners hidden in the Caponier. This is a hidden gun chamber. The people inside there are perfectly safe. You running past are anything but. So that's another challenge for you to surpass. You get out here, you're shot by sharpshooters up on the walls, there's another gun loop dead ahead. You're dead 10 times over already, but if somehow you've survived all this, you now realise you haven't even got through into the main castle yet. Good luck is all I have to say.
So thank you for watching, guys, as we've travelled all around Scotland from castles to Highland Glens to see the best of the Outlander filming locations.
And we'd love to know which of the Outlander filming locations so far have been your favourites, and if there's anywhere in Scotland that you would like to see popping up in future seasons. And if you've enjoyed Outlander, we truly hope you also enjoy the Scotlanders, so be sure to like and subscribe.